Queer theorists believe that binary oppositions are inherently hierarchical, with one pole of the binary oppressing the other. They also believe that it is progressive to disrupt the binary oppositions by creating categories between them. This is a process known as queering. The binary opposition between male and female is queered by downplaying the significance of biological sex and elevating the significance of a gender identity. Now, this is a strategy that is being introduced into primary school education in Wales, where children are encouraged to believe that they have a gender, where gender is not a synonym for sex, but it is an identity.
Stop transphobia. Start accepting us for who we are. Start supporting us for who we want to become regardless of our gender.
Start respecting everyone's unique talent and start supporting equality and happiness.
Grando our nominees.
Start making peace in the world.
Listen to us, what we're saying right now.
As Professor Renold from Cardiff University, the architect of the Welsh Government RSE Code and Guidance, writes in a 2005 paper, queering childhood involves not just the queering of sexual binary oppositions such as male and female and heterosexual, homosexual, but also the generational binaries, adult, child and sexual, asexual. Now, this education is not just happening in Wales. The exact same issues are being experienced in the United States, the birthplace of these ideas. In a podcast titled Mind Matters, the host reviews a book by author Logan titled The Queering of the American Child, How a New School Religious Cult Poisons the Minds and Bodies of Normal Kids. The host examines the meaning of the word queer.
So, when it comes to queer, let's first talk about what it means to be queer. Now, according to the theorist, and let me say this up front, everything that I say here today isn't necessarily mine or Logan Lansing's opinion when it comes to talking about what queer theory is. This is queer theory as stated by the people who created, wrote, developed queer theory. All of these definitions are theirs. So, according to the theorist, queer is both an identity and an action. Those two things are very important to understand the difference. The first thing is that it doesn't necessarily mean gay, although it can refer to somebody who is gay, because the identity of being queer means little more than standing or having an identity that falls outside of the norm. That's really all it is. And to expand on that, I'm going to use a quote from a famous queer theorist so you can understand a little more specifically and understand the context around what they're saying. This is from world-renowned queer theorist David Halperin. Unlike gay identity, which, though deliberately proclaimed in an act of affirmation, is nonetheless rooted in the positive fact of homosexual object choice, queer identity needn't be grounded in any positive truth or in any stable reality. As the very word implies, queer does not name some natural kind or refer to some determinate object. It acquires its meaning from its oppositional relation to the norm. Queer is by definition whatever is at odds with the normal, the legitimate, the dominant. There is nothing in particular to which it necessarily refers. It is an identity without an essence. It is an identity without an essence. Now, that's a little prosy, but what it really means is that it's a negative identity. So it doesn't point to any specific thing that it is. All it means to be queer is to stand outside of what society considers normal. This is why it's so easy and to be queer, in the sense that all you have to do is look at what's normal and then declare yourself outside of that norm, and that in itself is queer. Now, there's also queer the action. Now, queer the action is, and I quote, to destabilize the social, cultural, and political normalizing structures that work to solidify identities, and in doing so, skew power toward the norm. So, because they believe that all norms are regulated and connected to social power, what they're doing is, through their identity, challenging the norms, challenging everything legitimate, and then going into places and actually through their identity and their actions, they will be queer and then queer a space. That's what it means to be queer as an identity and queer as an action. You stand outside of the norm, and then you find normal spaces and you challenge those normal spaces. When you put those things together, you have a person that is and does queer, because you have to have the identity and then act upon the identity by queering spaces, as they call it.
Queer theory is inherently divisive because it creates a category of people in opposition to the normal who can both lay claim to being more interesting than normal and oppressed by the normal. Now, these ideas being spread into Welsh schools.
And recently I met with a comprehensive school in my constituency. Actually, it was the school council, and they said, would you come upstairs now and meet our Q&A group? And I said, oh, yes, that would be good. And it was, the young people had set up a group which was called Queers and Allies, and a Q&A group. And they were actually meeting in the library area, and they had children and young people from all year groups. And it was, they changed the way they could all work together and support each other, and it was supported by the school. I think that's quite, I did say I'd invite them in when we have our next update on the LGBTQ Action Plan, but I think you probably will know of some evidence of that kind.
New definitions of the words sex and gender contained within the RSE guidance have been made mandatory for all publicly funded schools in Wales. Similarly, new definitions of the words sex and gender contained within the LGBTQ Action Plan have been made mandatory for all publicly funded organisations in Wales. The Wales Centre for Public Policy, based at Cardiff University, advises government ministers and civil servants. It states, the Welsh Government has chosen to define gender as how sex bodies are lived, represented and regulated. The word gender is no longer to be regarded as a synonym for sex within schools or any publicly funded bodies. This is in line with the goal of queer theorists. Jeremy Miles tells us we have brought in these changes despite an organised misinformation campaign involving hard right elements. Pushing back against this redefinition of the words sex and gender is regarded as being a hard right position, because demonising people as being hard right is easier than engaging with the issues. People do have valid concerns. Leo Sapir explains the impact of similar policies in the United States.
Schools were gently but consistently prodded to move into this direction. So when a school implements these seemingly neutral and good-intended policies whose purpose is to promote inclusion, understanding, respect, for example, by teaching about transgender issues, by teaching about gender identity, putting up posters of being an ally to trans people and this, that, and the other.
So Nash, just like me, is non-binary. So they aren't sure if they're a boy or a girl.
They think that they're just merely providing emotional support or an inclusive environment. What they don't understand is that they are, number one, causing identity dislocation and disassociation, meaning They're taking kids for whom being a boy or a girl would otherwise just be at the background of their consciousness. They wouldn't even be thinking about it. But now all of a sudden it becomes a question. Do I accept my assigned sex at birth? Does it feel right to me? It becomes a problem, and a problem that you can solve through an act of will. You can declare yourself, assert yourself to be something else.
In the past decade, the number of trans-identifying kids has risen 30 to 40-fold by some estimates. The UK's Tavistock clinic recorded a rise of 3,360% in number of patients between 2009 and 2018. A recent Reuters investigation found that gender dysphoria diagnoses rose 20% annually between 2017 and 2020, and then 80% between 2020 and 2021. This extremely rapid increase in trans-identifying youth has led many to wonder whether the phenomenon is real, or whether it's a sort of social contagion driven by pressure both from peers, social media, and authority figures.
Two highly influential members of the Welsh Government LGBTQ expert panel, responsible for drafting the LGBTQ Action Plan, are Stonewall founding member Lisa Power and activist and panel chair Lou Thomas, pictured with former Education Minister Jeremy Miles. They were described as expert witnesses at a Vale Glamorgan Council meeting in 2018, where the Vale Glamorgan Transgender Inclusion Toolkit, approved by Stonewall Cymru, was approved. The toolkit has since been revised. In reference to a hypothetical trans-identifying boy, the original toolkit stated, although the individual in question may have the body of a boy, they are, in every other respect, a girl, and as such have the right under the Equality Act to change with the girls and to be treated fairly as such. Some organisations are pushing back against this ideology, including LGB Alliance, Sex Matters and Transgender Trend, who in 2017 produced guidance for schools in a resource pack titled Supporting Gender Diverse and Trans-Identified Students in Schools. In complete contrast to the Vale Glamorgan Transgender Toolkit, the document stated, to believe that your authentic self is split off from the body in the form of a brain-based innate gender identity results in a mind-body split which would normally be recognized as an indication of mental ill health. Good mental health is characterized by the ability to accept reality. Encouraging children to feel comfortable in their own sexed bodies entails creating a culture of respect for the body and what it is capable of, respecting boundaries and differences and fostering bodily integrity. This is especially important in the teenage years when adolescents are developing sexually. In May 2024, the Department of Education published draft RSE guidance. The guidance stated, schools should not teach about the broader concept of gender identity. Gender identity is a highly contested and complex subject. It is a sense a person may have of their own gender, whether male, female, or a number of other categories. This may or may not be the same as their biological sex. Many people do not consider that they or others have a separate gender identity. If asked about the topic of gender identity, schools should teach the facts about biological sex and not use any materials that present contested views as fact, including the view that gender is a spectrum. Materials suggesting that someone's gender is determined by their interests or clothing choices should not be used, as it risks leading pupils who do not comply with sex stereotypes to question their gender when they might not have done so otherwise. Where schools decide to use external resources, they should avoid materials that use cartoons or diagrams that oversimplify this complex concept or that could be interpreted as being aimed at younger children. Schools should consult parents on the content of external resources on this topic in advance and make all materials available to them on request. This guidance is not applicable to schools in Wales, where very different instructions are being pushed. In March 2024, NSGAD published a report titled Hung Out to Dry, the Impact of Welsh Government Inaction on Gender Distressed Children, Their Families and Their Schools. The report listed the most commonly used external providers of RSE in Welsh schools. Top of the list is Stonewall. This is unsurprising. In 2020, Estyn published guidance for schools titled Celebrating Diversity and Promoting Inclusion, Good Practice in Supporting Lesbian, Gay, Bisexual and Transgender Learners in Schools and Colleges. The guidance referenced Stonewall 37 times. It made no reference to transgender trend. Indeed, the former head of Stonewall Cymru has been reported to have stated on Twitter, "Hi schools, a resource pack from Transgender Trend is doing the rounds. It contains deliberately distorted information and advice that is potentially dangerous to the well-being of trans young people. Want advice? Stonewall Cymru and Transform Cymru can help. Transform Cymru teach children that gender is a spectrum."
In some ways we are moving to a point where people are starting to consider other genders, but still things seem to be really pink and blue or really binary, really male and female, and going outside of that is considered abnormal when it shouldn't be really.
I've also been told that you take gender too literally. You sort of say, back when I was younger, no one cared. It's like, yeah, they did. Of course they did. They just didn't speak out about it because they were scared, because there was discrimination that was like much worse than it is now.
It's important to know that there aren't like just standard male to female. There's a lot more to explore.
Because gender isn't about opposites. It's more of a sort of scale. That's why sort of non-binary and agender, etc., or people who identify more with female or more with male, but they're not necessarily agender. You know, it's sort of more of a spectrum, I think.
Andrew White is now working as Director of Wales at National Lottery Heritage Fund and is member of the Gorsedd of the Bards. Second on the list of the most influential RSE providers in Wales is Brook. Brook work very closely with Professor Renold and tell children that gender refers to the way in which a person feels and thinks about themselves and the way they dress, speak or move. This can be different to the sex they were given at birth. The way you feel about your gender is called your gender identity. Brook have responded to the Department of Education draft RSE consultation document by stating, explicitly excluding discussion of gender identity will create a silence and a vacuum where misinformation and bullying will thrive. Third on Merched Cymru's list is the Proud Trust. The Proud Trust explained to children how they can figure out their gender identity. Following the Proud Trust is Just Like Us, whose ambassador, Ben Pechey, tells all trans and non-binary young people that they're all magical and amazing. He can't wait for their journey, and he is there for them.
It's been such a hard year. It's been such a hard decade so far, but I want you to know how magical you are, how amazing you are, and we're all here for you. I'm here for you, and I don't know where we're going, but when we get there, it's going to be amazing, and I'm so excited for everything that you're going to do. I can't wait for your journey.
Just Like Us are followed by the Sex Education Forum. In a report commissioned by former Conservative MP Miriam Cates, it states, the Sex Education Forum lists on its website approximately 47 partners that specifically advertise that they give RSE services for schools and colleges. Of this number, 27 openly advocate a commitment to gender theory and transgender ideology on their websites. The remaining 20 do not publicly declare their position since their materials are behind a paywall. However, none openly express either a gender-critical view, a religious view, or that they teach various views. Next on the list, the Rainbow Flag Award use resources created by the Proud Trust, including Alien Nation, that uses a poster with 3 planets, Planet Girl, Planet Boy, and Planet Non-Binary. The poster asks children, which planet were you sent to as a baby? And which planet do you feel closest to today? The Rainbow Flag Award is followed by Timbrell Education, the company of Ian Timbrell, who this year gave a presentation to school governors.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. A very warm welcome to this next session of National School Governors Awareness Day. We're delighted to welcome Ian Timbrell to actually lead this session for us. Ian will no doubt tell you a bit about himself anyway, but Ian is an ex-teacher, deputy head of a school down in Wales, but is a recognised authority these days on LGBTQ plus issues and also with regard to inclusion, but also aspects of relationship, sex and health education as well. So with no more ado, very warm welcome. Thanks for coming, Ian, and over to you.
During the presentation, Timbrell displayed a tweet where he described lesbian and co-founder of the LGB Alliance, Kate Harris, as an awful person. The tweet was a retweet of a Pink News article in which, during a court case brought by Mermaids, the Good Law Project and others, where they attempted to have the LGB Alliance's charitable status revoked. It is claimed that Harris said that she doesn't believe LGB children exist. Now, it is not easy to verify the quote or the context in which it was used because that quote does not appear in the record of the court case by tribunal tweets. What is clear from the transcript is that Harris has serious concerns about gender identity being taught as fact in schools, something that is evidently of no concern to Ian Timbrell. Timbrell has evidently no hesitation in publicising disparaging comments about the LGB Alliance. His husband, Rhys Good, shown with him in the picture, achieved some notoriety by supporting Lord Michael Cashman after he accused Labour candidate Rosie Duffield of being lazy or frit after she explained that she wouldn't be attending hustings because of death threats against her. The director of Umbrella Cymru, Nick Lewis, used to describe himself as a queer theorist on his LinkedIn profile, but that seems to have changed. But he does have a master's from Cardiff University. In February 2024, the Welsh Government issued a progress update on the LGBTQ Action Plan. They wrote, Action 26, provide national trans guidance for schools and local authorities. The Welsh Government will be responsible for the content of the guidance. To inform policy development, the Welsh Government has established external groups to provide information and to enable the consideration of a range of views. The external groups include the School of Social Sciences, Cardiff University, who are pushing queer theory into Welsh schools. Brook, who work very closely with the Cardiff University School of Social Sciences and who intervened in support of the Tavistock in an appeal to the Kira Bell judgment. And the Catholic Education Service. In April 2024, the Catholic Bishops of England and Wales published a pastoral reflection titled Intricately Woven by the Lord. In it, they write, Gender identity theory suggests that everyone has an inner gender identity which, for some people, fails to match the biological sex, male or female. That, it is argued, is assigned to them at birth by cultural convention. It is claimed that it is this inner gender identity which makes a person a man or a woman, or neither, and not their biological sex. It is difficult to speak of a coherent movement in which all proponents of gender identity theory speak with a unified voice. Nevertheless, those who propose these ideas are generally at odds with a holistic understanding of the human person. They adopt a dualistic understanding, totally separating the material from the psychological and spiritual. Such a view of the human person is highly pervasive across sections of society, raising significant and pressing pastoral challenges for the Church, as well as challenges in the fields of law, medicine, education, business, and religious freedom. Following the example of Pope Francis in this sensitive area, we too distinguish between pastoral care of the person experiencing these struggles and transgender ideology. We recognized echoes of our position in many people across different spheres of society, such that there is a synergy between the Church and many other voices who, through science, reason, philosophy, and other approaches, highly value biological sex and affirm the importance of the human body as created. Like Transgender Trend, Sex Matters, LGB Alliance, Mermaids, Leo Sapir, and the former UK Conservative government, the Catholic Church rejects the idea that we all have a gender identity that is independent of our sex. It is difficult to see how consensus between these polar opposite views held by external stakeholders can be found. The Mermaids report states that schools in Wales urgently need clear, legally compliant guidance from the Welsh Government on making decisions regarding gender distressed or questioning pupils. In the absence of such guidance, schools are taking widely varying approaches, often steered by advice or toolkits from transgender campaigning organisations that have a track record of misrepresenting the law, and without expert input on whether that is in the best interests of the child. The report documents some case studies. Welsh Government Transgender Guidance was promised in 2023 and in 2024, but instead of following the lead of the Department of Education, the government have turned once again to Cardiff University and the Wales Centre for Public Policy to conduct a review of existing evidence. As it states on their website, the Wales Centre for Public Policy was asked to support the development of this guidance through examining the existence evidence-based. We have commissioned the Rapid Research Evaluation and Appraisal Lab at University College London to undertake a rapid evidence review. The portents are not great, and like the UK government, the Wales Centre for Public Policy refers to transgender children rather than gender-questioning children, and in their evidence review they cite an article co-authored by the highly controversial academic Jack Turban.